They read the names in alphabetical order, the way they had every autumn for 11 years. Colby Rhodes stood at the end of the third row with his hat in his hands and waited for the R's. The folding chair behind him had a bent leg, and it ticked whenever the wind came across the practice field. Somebody's grandmother 2 rows up kept a cough down in her sleeve. The loudspeaker on the pole had a rattle in it that made every third word sound like it was coming from underwater. Perkins, Ramsey, Reyes. Then the man at the microphone turned the page. Colby waited another second, the way you wait for a door you are certain will open. He watched the man's thumb smooth the paper flat. He watched him find his place and clear his throat and go on to the S's. So he said it out loud. Just once, and not loudly, the way you'd say it to a clerk who had misread a form. Dean Rhodes. The cough 2 rows up stopped. He did not shout. He did not argue. He said the name a second time, and then 2 hands came down on his shoulders, one on each side, and they were polite hands. He knew both of them. The left one belonged to Tom Vetter, who had carried the front of his father's casket and who still brought their mother a bag of pecans every October. The right one belonged to a man whose name he could not get to come up. They walked him out along the row, past the knees, past the purses on the grass. Nobody looked at him. 400 people in a high school parking lot, and every one of them found something interesting about their own shoes. At the end of the last row, an old dog got to his feet. Argo was 10 that fall. He was mostly deaf. His back legs had started going out from under him in the spring, and since June he had gotten up for exactly 3 things: food, the door, and the sound of Colby's truck. He had slept through the invocation. He had slept through the color guard. Now he was standing in the wet grass with his ears forward and his hindquarters shaking with the effort of holding himself there, and he was not looking at Colby. He was looking at the platform. Somewhere under his own pulse, Colby heard 2 short syllables. It was the way his father used to bring that dog in from the back fence at supper. 2 notes, low, no name in them, that anybody else would have recognized. He had not thought about it in years, and he did not go looking for it now. It just came up out of the grass with the dog. Up on the risers, where the folding chairs were nicer and had cushions tied to them, something moved, a man shifting, a shoulder turning away, or a head going down toward a program that did not need reading. Colby caught it the way you catch a bird going out of a hedge, after, not during, and only the part where the leaves are still moving. Then Tom Vetter's hand tightened on his arm, and the parking lot went by, and he did not see who it was. His mother had told him not to go. That was this morning, in the kitchen, with the burner ticking under the kettle and her back to him. Same as every year, honey, don't make it a thing. He had taken his hat off the hook anyway, and she had not said another word about it. She was already in the truck when he got there. She had the window down and her hands in her lap, and she was looking straight out through the windshield at the ball field fence. Argo came behind him at his own speed. It took the dog 4 tries to get his hindquarters into the truck bed, and Colby did not help him because helping him was a thing they had fought about all summer, and because his own hands were not steady enough to be gentle right then. They were 2 miles out of town before he said anything. Who sits up front? What? On the risers, the chairs with the cushions. Sponsors, she said. The Veterans Post. People who give money. Who else? His mother turned the radio on. It was a country station out of the county seat, and it was playing something with a fiddle in it. And she left her hand on the dial for a second longer than she needed to, and then she put it back in her lap. Colby. I'm asking who sits up front. They read the ones they read, she said. That's all it is. It's a list. The fiddle went on. A pickup passed them going the other way and lifted 2 fingers off the wheel, and Colby lifted 2 fingers back without knowing whose truck it was. At the house he did not go inside. He went out to the shed instead and stood there a while with the door open and the cold coming off the concrete, and then he dragged the footlocker out from under the workbench where it had been since the spring they moved it out of the hall closet. The latch was rusted through on one side. He worked it with a screwdriver. His father's things did not smell like his father anymore. That had gone a couple of years ago. Now it was just dust and old canvas and the machine oil off a pocket knife, a pair of gloves gone stiff, a unit roster on a folded sheet of paper with a coffee ring on it, a church key. A green notebook, spiral-bound at the top the way carpenters carry them, jammed down the side with the gloves on top of it. He moved the gloves and read the roster instead. 11 names on it. 2 he knew were gone. One with a phone number written beside it in his father's block letters, and beside the number, in the same hand, the word home with a line under it, Ruben Ortiz. He was still standing there with the roster in his hand when the shed light went on behind him. His mother had her coat on over her church dress and her reading glasses up in her hair. "You'll freeze out here. Did you know Dad kept a book?" She reached past him. It was not fast and it was not slow. She picked the green notebook up out of the footlocker, and she tucked it under her arm the way you'd carry a hymnal, and she closed the lid with her free hand. "That's mine," she said. "That's my address book. Come inside, I'll make you something." He watched her go up the 2 steps to the kitchen door with it under her arm. His mother had never in her life kept an address book. She kept numbers on the back of the light bill, in pencil, and threw the bill away in January. The county veterans office was 1 room behind the tax assessor, with a window unit in the wall that ran even in October because the thermostat had been broken since before the woman working there had taken the job. Her name was Dorothy, and she brought his file out in 11 minutes, which he understood later was fast. "This is what we have," she said. "This is all anybody has. 2 pages, a casualty summary with his father's service number on it, and an after-action report, 3 paragraphs, typed on a machine that dropped its lowercase e a little below the line. The first paragraph had 1 line in it he had never been given before, and he read that one twice. Sergeant Rhodes was fatally injured while recovering personnel from the lead vehicle. Recovering personnel. Somebody. It did not say who, and there was no place in either page where it said who. Then he read the 3rd paragraph 4 times. The handling team did not mark the route prior to convoy movement. What does that mean? It means the file's closed, hon. No, I'm asking what the sentence means. Dorothy took her glasses off and let them hang. She had a picture of 2 boys on the desk, in a frame with a crack in the corner of the glass. "It means when they wrote it up, that's what they wrote," she said. "I've been doing this 19 years. I can tell you how to ask for a review. I can't tell you it'll go anywhere. There's a window on those, and the window's been shut a long while." "How long?" "Longer than 6 years. He asked her to make him a copy, and she made him 2 without saying anything about the machine being for office use. Outside, the truck had gone cold. Argo was in the passenger seat now because it had rained, and Colby had lifted him in, and the dog put his head down on Colby's leg and left it there the whole way home, which he did not usually do. His mother was peeling potatoes at the sink. "Where's Dad's green notebook?" "I told you what that is." "Can I see your address book then?" The peeler kept going. A strip of skin came off and went in the bowl, and then another one, and she said, "It's around here somewhere," in the voice she used on people who came to the door about the church roof. He took his supper out to the shed. The high school put the memorial up on their website every year, because the athletic director's son ran the video club, and the video club needed something to do in October. Colby found it on his phone, with the space heater going, and Argo asleep across his boots. 41 minutes. A camera on a tripod at the back of the parking lot, so the sound came in thin, and everybody on the platform was the size of a thumbnail. He watched himself get walked out at the 16-minute mark. It looked like nothing. It looked like a kid leaving early. He watched the rest of it because he did not know what else to do with the evening. He had the phone lying face up on the workbench, and Argo was asleep across his boots, with his muzzle against the metal leg of the bench, the way he slept against things now. At 29 minutes, a man came up to the microphone in a blue jacket and thanked the Veterans Post and the boosters and the families. The phone speaker flattened his voice down to almost nothing. Argo came up off the floor so fast, his back end swung around and hit the leg of the workbench. The dog did not bark. He got his feet under him and put his nose flat against the bench top an inch from the phone, and the hair came up in a ridge from his shoulders to his hips, and a growl started in him that Colby had never once heard out of him in the years they'd had him. Colby stopped the video. The dog stayed up. He dragged the bar back 30 seconds and let it run again, and he watched the dog instead of the screen this time. Argo did not turn an ear. He never did anymore. What he did was put his nose down on the wood and hold it there, on the surface the phone was sitting on. The ridge came up again. Then Colby did a thing he thought of afterward as a test, though at the time it was just curiosity. He picked the phone up off the bench and held it out in the air, at the same volume, and let the same 30 seconds run. Nothing. The dog watched his hand and lay back down. He set the phone on the wood again. The ridge came up a third time. Argo had been going deaf since he was 8. High things went first. A whistle, his own name, the truck door. What was left was down at the bottom, and most of what was left he took in the way an old dog does, through the boards under him and the wood he laid his muzzle against. It was not the face. On that screen there was no face, just a blue jacket and a pale smudge above it. It was not the smell either. The man was 600 miles away that night, in whatever town he lived in now, and there was nothing in the shed but dust and a space heater and a boy and a dog. It was something at the bottom of a voice, coming up through a workbench. Colby ran it back a fourth time and wrote down the timestamp on the inside of his wrist. Then he took his father's roster out of his coat and dialed the number with home written under it, and it rang 11 times before somebody picked it up and did not say anything. "Sir, my name is Colby Rhodes. I'm Dean's boy." The line stayed open. Somewhere behind the man a television was on, with the volume low. "I know who you are," Ruben Ortiz said. He drove to Caldwell the next afternoon, which is 40 minutes east and 1 county over, and he found the house by the truck in the yard, with the tailgate gone. Ortiz did not ask him in. He came out on the porch in a coat over a bathrobe, with a blanket across his knees, and he sat in a lawn chair and pointed Colby at the step, so for the whole hour Colby had his back to him and had to turn his head to hear. That was fine. It made it easier to listen. "They gave you the paper," Ortiz said. It was not a question. 3 paragraphs. "You want to know if it's true? I want to know who wrote it." Ortiz was quiet for a while. There was a wind chime on the porch missing 2 of its tubes, so it only made 2 notes, over and over, and never the same 2 in a row. "Your daddy marked that route," he said. "I was 4th vehicle. I watched him mark it." Colby's hand went down flat on the step, and the paint was blistered there, and he pressed it until the blisters cracked. "Would you say that? On paper, would you say that? I've got 2 grandkids in this house, and one of them starts at the community college in January." "Sir, I said I've got 2 grandkids." Ortiz pulled the blanket up. "Come back Thursday. There's a woman at the courthouse takes statements. I'll sign one. But you're going to sit there and hear the whole thing, son, including the part you're not going to like." Colby drove home in the dark with the heater roaring and did not turn the radio on. There was mail on the kitchen table when he came in, the light bill, a seed catalog, and a window envelope from the bank with the quarterly notice for the education account, the one that had been paying his tuition since he was 13 and that his mother had told him twice came from a state fund for families. The line where the depositor's name goes was blank, the way it had been blank for 6 years. He had never once thought about that until tonight. Tuesday to Thursday is 2 days, and Colby filled them both with things that did not need doing. He took the old memorial board out of the Veterans Hall storage with permission from nobody and cleaned it in the shed with a rag and a can of brass polish. It was the board they used before they built the new one, small, with 40-some names on it from 3 wars, and his father's was not on that one either, but it had been made in 1998, so that was not anybody's fault. He polished it for 2 hours. He got the tarnish out of the letters with a toothbrush. He practiced what he was going to say. He said it to the dog. It came out 4 different ways, and none of them sounded like a person talking. Argo followed him around the yard at a distance of about 15 feet, which was as close as he could keep up. Thursday was the 14th. The phone rang at 11:40 on Wednesday night. Colby knew before he picked it up. Nobody in that county calls a house at 11:40 unless somebody is dead or somebody has changed their mind. "It's Ruben." "Yes, sir. I'm not going to be able to come down there tomorrow." There was a long space. The television was on behind him again, and this time Colby could hear that it was a ball game. "I've got 2 grandkids in the house," Ortiz said. And I draw a pension out of the same place that wrote that paper, and I've got a lung that doesn't work anymore, and I sat here since Tuesday doing arithmetic. That's all I've been doing, arithmetic. You said you watched him market. I did watch him. So say that, son. The word came out and stopped. There is nobody left standing in this to make a thing like that go your way. There's you, there's a dog, there's a lady at the courthouse who takes statements and files them in a drawer. Colby stood in the dark kitchen with the phone cord wrapped once around his fingers and looked at the shape of the window. He could have said a lot of things. He had 2 days' worth of things, polished up like the board in the shed. Yes, sir, is what he said. I appreciate you telling me instead of not showing up. Colby, good night, sir. He hung up the phone and stood there and did not move for a while. Behind him the burner clicked. Then the kettle, then the cupboard, then the sound of a chair. His mother had come out in her robe. She had heard the whole thing from the hallway. She must have. The house was not big enough for anything else, and she was standing at the stove making coffee at 11:45 at night, and she was not looking at him. Well, she said. The spoon went around in the cup twice. That's that then. Her voice had something loose in it, something let out. It was the voice she used the morning they finally sold his father's truck, when the man drove it off and she came back in the house and said the porch would be easier to get to now. Say it different, Colby said. Say what different? That. She looked at him then. Whatever had been in her face went away, and what came up over it was the flat thing she wore to church. It's cold out here, she said. Turn the burner off when you're done. She took her coffee back down the hall and closed her door. Colby went out on the porch and sat down on the top step. Argo came up out of the dark, from around the corner of the house. He had been sleeping under the propane tank again, which he was not supposed to do, and he put one foot on the bottom step, and then the second foot, and then he tried for the third one. His back end did not come. It went sideways instead. His hip came down on the edge of the second step with a sound Colby heard in his teeth, and then the dog was down on his side in the frost, with his front paws still going, still trying, scraping at the board. Colby got both arms under him. 10 years is nothing for a person, and it is old, hard used, for a dog that spent 5 of those years working, and 2 of them being shipped from one place to another in a crate. He weighed 61 pounds. He had weighed 74 the year they got him. He got him up onto the porch and set him down on the boards, and Argo lay there breathing in a way that was too fast for lying still. Okay, Colby said. Okay, all right. He sat down beside him. He put his hand on the dog's shoulder, on the place where the hair had come up in a ridge 2 nights ago, and it was flat now, and it was damp with frost. The porch light drew moths even in October. The propane tank ticked as it cooled. Somewhere down the road, a dog that was not Argo barked 4 times and quit. Colby stayed out there. He was not thinking about the file. He was thinking about a thing that had happened when he was 13, 6 weeks after the funeral, when the army trucked the dog to their house in a crate with a tag on it, and 2 men in ACUs carried it up the drive and set it on the grass. And his mother had signed a paper on a clipboard, and the men had left, and Argo had come out of that crate and gone straight past both of them, up the steps, and stood at the front door and waited for somebody to open it. He had waited there 20 minutes. Nobody had explained anything to him. Nobody could. At some point Colby lay down on the porch boards with his coat over both of them, and that is how his mother found them, at 6 in the morning, the dog asleep and her son awake, both of them still out there in the cold with the light on. She stood in the doorway a long time before she went back in. When Colby came in for his boots at 8, he drove out to the high school without knowing why. The new memorial was in the courtyard by the flagpole, and it was still under its canvas from the ceremony because they leave it covered until the letters are recut for the new year and the plaque is set. The canvas was tied down with orange twine at 4 corners. Across the road, in front of the motel that has 9 rooms and a sign with the O burned out, there was a rental car with a plate from out of state. If the file was closed, then the money was the way in. That was the thinking. If he could show what the 3 paragraphs had cost this house in dollars, somebody somewhere had to open a drawer. The benefits paperwork was in the bottom of the hall filing cabinet in a brown accordion folder with a rubber band around it that had gone to powder. He worked through it at the kitchen table on Friday morning with a legal pad, and it took him 2 hours, and it was all as boring as he'd expected until page 9. Page 9 was the survivor election form, 2 signatures at the bottom. One was a notary's. The other was his mother's, in the hand she uses for checks, dated the 22nd of August, 6 years ago. And above the line, in 6-point type, so small he had to take the page to the window, the undersigned acknowledges having read and does not contest the attached report of investigation. The attached report was stapled behind it. He had read the 3 paragraphs already, at the county office, on a photocopy. It was different seeing the original with a staple through the corner and his mother's signature in front of it. He read it again anyway. And this time, because he was slower and it was quiet, he got down into the 2nd paragraph, into the timeline, where the times sat in a column. 0937, halt. 0941, convoy resumed movement. Somebody had told them to go on. 4 minutes. At the county office, they had given him a photocopy, and on a photocopy, the bottom of the last page comes out as a gray smear. This was the original. At the bottom of the 3rd paragraph, under the line that said Officer of Record, there was a signature in blue ballpoint that had gone through to the back of the sheet, and under it, typed Prout, NR, 1LT. He said the name out loud in the kitchen to hear what it sounded like. It did not sound like anything. He sat with that. The refrigerator cycled on and ran and shut off. There was no name anywhere in the paragraph. It was written the way those things are written, in a voice that has no person in it. The convoy resumed movement, as though a line of trucks had thought it over on its own and decided. His mother came in from the line with the wash basket on her hip. He turned page 9 around on the table so it faced her. She looked at it for about as long as it takes to read 6 words, and then she went and set the basket down on the counter and started pulling out the towels. You signed it. I signed 40 things that month. You signed the one that says you don't contest it. Colby, did you read it? The towel in her hands got folded and set down and picked back up. They came to the door twice, she said. The 2nd time there was a man from the office and he had a folder and he told me where to sign and I signed, and then in November the check started and it kept the lights on. You were 13, you had a hole in both shoes and you wouldn't say so. That's not what I asked. I know what you asked. Did you read it? She put the towel down. Yes, she said. The kitchen clock ran. It has run 4 minutes fast since he was in grade school, and nobody has ever fixed it. They were going to put it in the file, whether I signed my name or not, she said. That's what nobody understands about it. My name didn't make it true. My name just made the check come. His name is not on that board because of a piece of paper you didn't contest. You don't get to. 6 years, Colby said. 6 years of people in this town looking at me like. Argo came up off the floor between them. He did not growl. He got up and put himself broadside between the table and the counter, 61 pounds of him, and stood there swaying a little with his head low, and both of them stopped talking at the same time because the dog could not hear a word either of them was saying and had gotten up anyway. Colby took the accordion folder and left. He slept in the shed that night with the space heater, or he lay in the shed with the space heater. Around dusk he went in for a coat and stopped in the hallway because his mother's bedroom door was open and the closet door inside it was open too, and the closet had a cabinet in the bottom of it, a 2-door cabinet his father built out of birch when they were first married and never got around to sanding properly. Between the 2 doors of the cabinet, where they don't quite meet, there was a strip of green. He put a finger on the pull. It moved a 1/4 inch and stopped against a lock he had not known was ever on it. He heard the screen door and his mother coming up the steps with the wash, and he went out the back. Argo's bowl was full. It had been full since morning. He could see the dry line where the water had wicked up the kibble at the edge and stopped. The dog was lying by the propane tank with his nose pointed at the bowl and had been for 8 hours. Colby carried the bowl out to him. Nothing. He set it down and stood there, and the dog looked at the bowl and did not get up. So he sat down on the cold ground next to it and put his hand flat on the back of Argo's neck, the way his father used to do it, thumb up behind the ear, palm on the ridge of the neck, no patting, no talking. The dog got up and ate. He ate the whole bowl standing over it with his shoulder against Colby's arm, and when it was empty, he lay back down with his chin across Colby's boot. Colby sat out there until his fingers stopped working. It was full dark when he thought about the rental car. He had seen it twice now. Once Thursday morning in front of the motel, once again Friday when he came back from the courthouse. Same plate, out of state, a light-colored sedan of the kind nobody around there buys. In Hollis Grove there is one motel and it takes 9 cars, and most weeks it takes 4. He drove down at 11 at night and parked at the edge of the gravel and asked the man at the desk whether he had a guest named Pruitt. The man turned the register around without being asked to, which tells you what kind of motel it is, and said, "Room 7. Then he's out at his car. Colby walked around the side. The man had the trunk open and a garment bag in one hand, and he was maybe 40, in a windbreaker, with a haircut he had not changed in 20 years. He straightened up when the gravel sounded. He looked at Colby for a long time, longer than a stranger looks, and it was not fear, and it was not surprise, and Colby did not have a name for what it was until much later. "I know who you are," the man said. "Who told you to sign it?" The man did not answer. He shut the trunk, and he shifted the garment bag to his other hand, and he said, "It's late," and went up the outside stairs to the second floor. Colby stood in the gravel. The light in room 7 came on. Then it went off. Then it came back on, and it stayed on the rest of the night. Nathan Pruitt sat on the end of the motel bed with his shoes still on and the lamp burning, and did not sleep, and this is what he was not sleeping about. 6 years ago, on a supply road the drivers called the Flats because there was nothing on either side of it for 11 miles, a dog sat down. That is all it looks like. That is all it ever looks like. A Belgian Malinois goes stiff and takes 2 steps back and sits and does not take his eyes off a patch of ground that is exactly like every other patch of ground on that road. The handler came up the line on foot. Pruitt was a lieutenant then, 29 days into his first command, riding third vehicle with a map case in his lap and a schedule that had been written by somebody who had never driven that road. The handler put his hand on the roof of the truck. He was dusty to the eyebrows, and there was a sunburn line across his forehead where his helmet sat, and he was not a big man, which people never believe afterward. "Sir, he's got something. Give me 2 minutes." Pruitt remembered the face. Not the way you remember a photograph, the way you remember a face that was turned to you, waiting while you decided something. He remembered thinking, he has sat down on this road 4 times this week. He remembered thinking, we are 50 minutes behind. He remembered the radio, and the voice on it wanting to know their position, and the way his own voice sounded coming out of his mouth, higher than he wanted it, in front of 11 men. "We're moving up, get him in the truck." The handler stood there 1 second longer. Then he said, "Yes, sir," and he did not argue, and he turned around and started back down the line at a jog to bring the dog in. The blast came at 0941. Pruitt does not have the middle part. It is not a wound in his memory. It is simply not there, the way a page is not there. He has the sound, which was not a sound so much as a thing that happened to his chest, and he has the smell of scorched wiring, and he has a piece of the sky that was the wrong color. And he has one thing after, a hand fisted in the collar of his blouse, dragging him backward over the ground, his own heels bouncing, and somebody's forearm across his chest, and the noise a man makes when he is doing something heavier than he can do. Then a helicopter floor. He came up through it in the aid station, with his ears roaring and a medic shining a light at him, and the first thing he said, before his own name, before asking about the others, was, "Who pulled me out?" The medic said, "Lie back down, sir." He asked twice more that day. By the 3rd time he had begun to know, and after that he stopped asking, and he has not asked out loud in 6 years. The tent came 4 days later. A major from the support battalion, going home in 9 days, with a folding table and a stack of things that had to be closed before he rotated. Pruitt's arm was in a sling. His hearing was doing a thing where it came and went like a radio under a bridge. The major had it typed already. That is the part Pruitt has never been able to explain to himself, and he has had a long time to try. It was typed. Somebody had already decided what the sentence was going to be, and the paper existed before he walked into that tent, and all it was missing was a name at the bottom of it. The handling team did not mark the route prior to convoy movement. "Sir," the major said, "if you'd sign at the bottom there." He read it. He wants that on the record, at least in his own head. He read it. He got all the way through the sentence, and he understood exactly what it said and what it did not say. It did not say a lieutenant ordered the convoy forward over a positive indication. It did not say that anywhere. 20 seconds, that is the honest count. 20 seconds between reading it and signing it, and in that time he thought about his father, who was a police officer for 31 years in a town of 6,000 people, and who had never once had his name in the paper for anything except a base tournament. He thought about the 11 men. He thought that the man who had marked that route was dead and could not be hurt any further, and that thought had felt, for exactly as long as it took to write his name, like a mercy. He signed it, he handed back the pen, he walked out of that tent, and he has been walking out of it ever since. He started sending the money the following autumn. It goes to an education account at a bank in the county seat on the first Monday of the month, and he has never once put his name on the deposit line, and he knows to the dollar what it comes to, and he knows it does not come to anything at all. He had told himself, for 6 years, a sentence that had gotten smooth from use. Saying it now only hurts them again. Then in August, a woman from the county called him. She used the word officer twice in one sentence. She said a young man had come in and asked about a review, and that she was required to notify the officer of record and ask whether he wished to submit anything additional to the file. He was sitting in his car in a parking lot outside his daughter's school when she asked him that. His daughter is 11. Every November he stands up in that gymnasium and speaks for 6 minutes, and the children make him a paper wreath. "No," he said, "nothing additional." He said thank you. He put the phone down on the passenger seat. He sat in that car for 40 minutes without starting it. Then he flew out here and stood in the back at the ceremony and watched a boy get walked out of a parking lot by 2 men who thought they were being kind. And he watched an old dog he had last seen wearing a muzzle at an aid station get up off the grass on ruined legs and put his nose in the air. And he turned his face away like a coward. Now it was 1 in the morning, and he could not stay in that room. He drove out the county road with no plan he could have said out loud, and parked on the shoulder 200 yards short of the house. And then he walked, because that made even less sense, and he did it anyway. There was one light on in the kitchen. He could hear a fan running somewhere in the house. He got as far as the fence. The wind had been coming across the field toward the road all night, and then, the way it does at that hour, it turned. On the porch, in the dark, something moved. The dog came up out of a dead sleep with his nose lifted and his hackles going up in a ridge, and he did not bark. He had never in his life barked at a thing he was sure about, and he made a sound down low that carried across 40 feet of frozen grass. Nathan Pruitt stood at the fence with his hand on the post. Then he took his hand off the post, and he went back up the road to his car, and he did not knock. The dog woke him at 6:10 by putting his head on the shed cot and breathing on him. Colby came up on one elbow. Argo was already turning around, already going out the door, and he went 4 steps into the yard and stopped and looked back. "It's dark out," the dog went on. He went across the yard at a walk that took him twice as long as it should have, and twice he stopped and waited without turning around, the way you wait for somebody you know is following. Up the 2 steps, through the kitchen, down the hall, past the bathroom, past the door of the room Colby had slept in his whole life, to his mother's door, which was open 8 inches the way she always left it. Argo went in and lay down in front of the birch cabinet, not beside it. In front of it, broadside, filling the gap between the cabinet and the foot of the bed, and he put his chin on his paws and let out a breath and closed his eyes. Colby stood in the doorway with the hall light behind him. "Get up." The dog's ear moved. He did not get up. Argo. He had been losing it for 2 years and gone for most of 1, and both of them knew it. The boy's voice was up where the dog had nothing left, and Colby said it twice more anyway, and then his mother's voice came from the bed in the dark, awake, level, like she had been awake a while. "He's been doing that since Wednesday. Since every night this week, I step over him to get to my own closet. She sat up, the springs went. I've been telling myself he's cold. She did not turn the lamp on. She reached over to the nightstand and got her key ring, and she sat there on the edge of the bed in her nightgown, with the keys in her hand, for what felt like a long time. Then she got down on her knees on the floor next to the dog, which is not a thing his mother does easily anymore, and she put the little key in the lock on the birch cabinet. The green notebook was on top of a stack of things. Underneath it, Colby could see a folded flag box and a stack of letters with a rubber band and the little cardboard tube the certificate had come in. She held the notebook a second, and then she put it in his hands. "Sit down," she said. "I'm going to say it once." He sat on the floor with his back against the doorframe. Argo stayed where he was, between them, and did not open his eyes. "That August I had $311, she said. The insurance was going to take 14 weeks. The bank had already called twice about the note on the truck, and I'd already told them a lie about it. And 2 men came to my door with a folder, and one of them was very kind to me, and said all I had to do was sign where the tabs were. You read it." I read it standing up at that counter. She pointed with her chin at the kitchen, down the hall, and she was not looking at Colby. And I stood there and I thought, if I make a noise about this, they will take it to a board, and a board takes a year, and in a year we will not be in this house. And I thought, her hand went flat on her knee. I thought, Dean's dead. They can't hurt him anymore. And I can't feed a 13-year-old with a principal. You could have told me. You were 13. Ever. You could have told me ever. Yes, she said. That part I don't have an answer for. The furnace came on under the floor. Argo's back leg jumped twice in his sleep, the way they do. Colby turned the notebook over in his hands. It was a carpenter's spiral, top-bound, with a rubber band around it and the cover gone soft as cloth. Why'd you keep it in a locked cabinet? Because of what's in the back of it. What's in the back of it? You'll read it, she said. Then you'll know why I locked it up, and then you'll be angry with me for a different reason than you are now. He put his thumb under the rubber band and did not take it off yet. There was one more thing. He had it in his coat and had been carrying it for 5 days. The tuition account. His mother's face did not change, but her hands stopped. That's a state fund, she said. Mama. She got up off the floor. It took her a while. She went to the closet and moved 2 hangers and came back with a shoebox and set it on the bed and took the lid off. Envelopes. 6 of them, 1 a year, plain, with the quarterly notice still folded inside each one, the kind of thing a person keeps when they cannot bring themselves to either use it or throw it away. She took the top one out and turned it over. On the back flap somebody had written, in blue ballpoint, in small block capitals, "For the boy, not a debt." Nobody signs the deposit line, she said, but somebody wrote that on the outside the first year, and I have looked at those letters for 6 years. You know the handwriting. I've got a form in that cabinet with the same hand on it. She put the envelope back in the box and put the lid on. I knew by the 2nd year. You knew who he was, and you never. And what would you have done at 15, Colby? She said it quietly. Tell me what you'd have done at 15 with that man's name. He did not answer, because the true answer was in the room with them. His mother put the shoebox back in the closet. Then she stood at the window with her arms folded, looking out at the yard where it was getting gray. Read it, she said. I read it years ago. You read it, and then you decide. She went down the hall to start the coffee. Colby stayed on the floor with the dog against his leg and slid the rubber band off. The first page was a supply list in pencil. The second page was a diagram of a checkpoint with arrows on it. On the third page, halfway down, in block letters that leaned to the right and that he had last seen on a birthday card when he was 12, Argo working good. Don't let them split us up. He read the notebook for 3 days, not because it was long. It was 61 pages and half of them were supply lists. He read it for 3 days because every time he got near the back of it he found something to do with his hands instead. Argo took up a new job that week. Whenever Colby stood up from the kitchen table, for the door, for the stove, for anything, the dog got himself up and put his chest across the open notebook and lay down on it, and when Colby came back, he had to lift the animal's head off the page with both hands, like taking a cat off a newspaper. He did it 6 times before he understood the dog was not doing it for the notebook. The entry he needed was on page 44, dated the 9th of May. 0937 Argo SAT, strong. Same sign as the culvert. Called it up to 3, marked with chalk, LS shoulder. Requested 2 minutes. Under it, in the same block letters, one more line, denied, moving. That was it, that was the whole thing. 4 lines in a carpenter's notebook, written in the field by a man who wrote down everything, because that is the kind of soldier he was, and it said in his own hand that he had marked the route, and that he had called it in, and that he had been told to move. Colby put his hands flat on the table and sat there. Then he turned the page, because his mother had said he would be angry with her for a different reason, and he was not the kind of person who could leave that alone. The back 11 pages of the notebook were the working log. Every dog team keeps one. Hours worked, hours rested, temperature, hydration. There are limits written into it. A dog can search so long in that heat, and then he has to be down for so long. And the limits are not suggestions. They exist because a tired dog starts giving you what you want instead of what is there. His father had written it all down, every day, including the last week. May 4th, 6 HRS, May 5th, 6.5 HRS, May 6th, 7 HRS, tired, my call. The limit was 4, 3 days over the line, in his father's handwriting, recorded by his father, because his father wrote down everything. Colby got up and walked out to the shed, and stood there, and came back. He understood immediately what it meant, which is the worst part. It meant that on the 9th of May a lieutenant had a dog team in front of him that was known to be run past its hours, and a schedule, and a dog that had sat down 4 times that week. It did not make what the lieutenant did right. It made it something a person could say out loud in a room and have half the room nod. That is what he had. 4 lines that cleared his father, stapled to 11 pages, that gave every man in that county a way to shrug. He sat back down. He took a pencil out of the jar, and he laid the flat of it under the 2 worst lines in the working log, and drew them out, lightly, the way you do when you are going to erase it, 2 gray strokes, not even dark. Then he sat and looked at it for a while. Then he took the eraser and got them out, and blew the crumbs off the page, and rubbed the paper with his thumb, until it was warm. The gray was gone. The dent the pencil made was still there. You could see it if you turned the page to the window, and he sat there turning it to the window and thinking about a major with a stack of things to close and 9 days left and a typed sentence that had been written before anybody walked into the tent. He drove to the drugstore in the county seat because Hollis Grove does not have a copier. He copied the whole book. 61 pages at 10 cents, both the 4 lines and the 11 pages, and the girl at the counter had to change the toner halfway through and apologized twice. Then he drove back and put 1 copy in an envelope and left it at the motel desk for room 7, and did not leave a note with it because he could not think of a sentence that was not either begging or a threat. It was a Tuesday. The ceremony was Thursday. They had set it for Thursday because the school had a home game Friday, and the post wanted the flags up anyway. That night, at 9 o'clock, somebody knocked on the back door. Colby was in the shed. He heard it because the shed window faces the porch. He came around the corner of the house in the dark and stopped because his mother was standing in the doorway with the kitchen light behind her and her hand on the frame, and there was a man on the bottom step with his hat off. Nathan Pruitt did not go up the steps. He stayed on the ground with the light coming down on the top of his head and Colby's mother above him, and they were both quiet for long enough that Colby heard the propane tank tick. "Mrs. Rhodes, I know who you are," she said. "I've known 5 years." Pruitt's hand went to the back of his neck and came down again. "What's the boy going to do Thursday?" His mother stood in that doorway. She has a way of standing still that Colby has seen her use on bill collectors and on the church board, and once on a doctor. "He's going to tell the truth," she said, "all of it, including his daddy's part." Pruitt looked at the step. "He knows about the hours," he said. "It was not a question either. He's known since Sunday, and he copied the whole book, and he didn't take out a page." She let that sit. "I'd think about that if I were you, Major." She closed the door. Colby stood at the corner of the house and did not move, and Pruitt turned around and walked back down the drive past 6 feet of him without seeing him, and got in the rental car and sat in it a long time before the headlights came on. In the morning there were 2 men at the flagpole in the courtyard, and one of them had wire cutters, and they were taking the orange twine off the corners of the canvas. The second ceremony was smaller. 2 weeks later in the year, colder, and they held it in the courtyard by the flagpole instead of the parking lot, so there were only about 90 chairs, and most of them filled. Colby came with the notebook in a paper sack because he did not own a briefcase. His mother wore the coat she keeps for funerals. Argo rode in the truck bed on a folded moving blanket, and Colby carried him down and set him in the grass at the end of the last row, which was the same place he had been the first time, and the dog put his chin on his paws and watched the platform. Pruitt was up on the risers again. He had asked to be, or somebody had put him there, and he sat at the end of the second row in a blue jacket with his hands on his knees. They read the names in alphabetical order. When the man at the microphone got to the R's, he read Ramsey and Reyes, and then he stopped and looked out over the 90 chairs and said, "The family of Sergeant First Class Dean Rhodes has asked to speak." Colby went up. He had practiced this in the shed 12 times, and every one of them had sounded like a person on television, so he did not do any of them. He put the paper sack on the podium and took the notebook out and opened it to page 44 and held it up so the pages faced the crowd, which was useless because nobody could see a thing from there. "This is my dad's field notebook," he said. "It was in my mother's closet. I'm going to read 2 parts out of it, and then I'm going to sit down." Somebody's chair creaked. 9th of May, 0937. Argo sat, strong, same sign as the culvert, called it up to 3, marked with chalk, left shoulder, requested 2 minutes. He turned the page. Then it says, denied, moving. He let that be quiet. The report in his file says the handling team did not mark the route. That is not true, and he wrote down that it isn't true, 4 minutes before it happened, in his own hand. 90 people did not move. Now the other part, Colby said. His mother, in the second row, put her hand over her mouth and took it down again. The back of this book is his working log. It's how many hours he ran the dog. The limit was 4 hours a day in that heat. The week before he died, my dad ran Argo 6 hours, then 6.5, then 7. He wrote it down himself. He put his own initials on it. A. Tired. My call. The wind came across the courtyard and took the flag out straight and let it go. So he broke a rule, Colby said, for 3 days. And I thought about leaving that page out, and I want to tell all of you that I thought about it for about an hour, and then I made a copy of the whole book instead, because if I take a page out of my father's record to make him look better, then I'm doing the exact thing that was done to him. He put his hand flat on the notebook. Both things are true. He was tired, and he ran his dog too long, and he knew it, and he marked that road, and he called it in, and somebody told him to move. And then he looked up at the risers, at the second row, and he found the blue jacket, and something came up out of him that he had been holding down since he was 13 years old. He died for you. It came out too loud in a courtyard that size. It cracked in the middle of it. A woman in the front row flinched. The report says he was killed recovering personnel from the lead vehicle. It doesn't say who. Nobody's ever told this family who. He was pointing now, and he did not know when his arm had come up. You were in that convoy. You were in front of him. You know what he was doing when he died, and you have known for 6 years, and you signed the paper anyway. My mother has had 6 years of this town. I have had 6 years of it. And you sat up there in a cushioned chair last month and turned your face away from his dog. Tom Vetter started to stand up. Nathan Pruitt got there first. He came out of the second row and down the 3 steps off the riser, and he did not go to the podium. He stopped in the grass at the bottom, in front of everybody, and he turned around so he was facing the chairs and not the boy. "My name is Nathan Pruitt," he said. "I was a lieutenant. It was my convoy." The man at the microphone reached out and then did not do anything with his hand. His dog gave a positive indication at 0937. Sergeant Rhodes came up to my vehicle on foot and asked me for 2 minutes. I told him we were moving up, in front of 11 men, because I was 50 minutes behind schedule, and I was 29 days into my first command, and I did not want to be the officer who stopped a convoy for a dog that had sat down 4 times that week. He stopped. Nobody helped him. The blast was at 0941, 4 minutes. His voice went, and he got it back. I was pulled out of that vehicle by Sergeant Rhodes. He went in for me. That is why I am standing in this courtyard, and he is on that board. He put his hands down at his sides. 4 days later, a major handed me a typed report that said the handling team failed to mark the route. It was already typed, and I read it, and I understood what it said, and I signed my name on it anyway, and I have let it stand for 6 years. I want that recorded, and I'll say it to whatever board wants to hear it, and I'll say it in writing today. Then, from the end of the last row, an old dog stood up. It took him 3 tries. Nobody was looking at him. Every face in that courtyard was pointed at the man in the blue jacket, and so the only person who saw the whole thing was Colby, up on the platform, watching his father's dog get his back end under him for the 5th or 6th time that autumn. Argo came up the aisle between the folding chairs. He walked the way he walked now, slow, with his hindquarters going a little sideways with each step, and he took a long time to cross that grass, and one by one the 90 people turned around to see what everybody else was looking at. He went straight past Colby's mother. He went past the podium and the flagpole. He stopped at Nathan Pruitt's shoes. He put his nose up once. He stood there a second, and everybody in that courtyard was ready for the sound they had heard on that porch, the sound that had come out of him at a phone speaker in a shed. Then he lay down across the man's feet and put his chin on the toe of his shoe and let out all his breath at once. Pruitt's face came apart. He got down on one knee in the grass with his hand on the dog's shoulder and stayed there, and he was not making any noise about it, and nobody in that courtyard said a word for what felt like a long while. Colby's mother came up out of the second row. She climbed the 2 steps to the platform and stood next to her son and put her hand through his arm the way she used to when they walked into church late and faced the 90 people with him. She did not say anything yet. Afterward, everybody stood around the way people do, and then the cold moved them off in 2s and 3s toward the cars. When the courtyard was almost empty, Nathan Pruitt was still standing in the same place, and the dog was still lying across his feet, and nobody had come to call him off. They cut the letters 10 days later, because the man who does the engraving works out of a shop in the county seat and had 4 headstones and a bank sign ahead of them. He came out on a Tuesday morning with a case of tools and a piece of felt he put down on the grass to kneel on. It took him a little over 2 hours. There were 11 people there for it, which is about 10 more than usually show up for a man kneeling in front of a plaque with a mallet. The new letters came out brighter than the old ones. That is how brass is. The rest of the board had 11 years of weather on it, and this one name was raw and yellow and obvious. "That'll dull down in a season or 2, the engraver said. "By spring you won't pick it out." "Leave it," Colby's mother said. So they left it. When it was done, the man at the microphone was not there, and there was no microphone, and everybody sort of waited to see whether anybody was going to say something. Wanda Rhodes went up and put her hand flat on the plaque, over the new letters, the way you'd put your hand on somebody's back. "Dean," she said. That was all. She said it out loud, in front of 10 people, in the ordinary voice you use to call somebody who is in the next room and might not have heard you the first time. She had not said his name in front of another human being in 6 years. Colby knew that the way you know the weather in your own house. Then she opened her handbag and took out a photograph and did not pass it around. It was a picture from the backyard, taken from too low and slightly crooked because Colby had taken it the summer he was 12 with a disposable camera his aunt gave him. In it, his father is crouched down beside a young dog with his fingers in the collar, redoing the buckle, and he is not looking at the camera. He is looking off to the left at something out of the frame, and he is laughing at it, with his mouth open and his eyes almost shut. The thing out of the frame was Colby, who had said something that day that nobody now remembers. His mother leaned the photograph against the base of the plaque, in the grass, for as long as it took everybody to see it. Then she picked it back up and put it in her bag, because it was the only copy, and it looked like rain. Nathan Pruitt came for the engraving. He stood at the back, behind everyone, in the same windbreaker. He had filed his statement the week before, 11 pages, notarized, sent to 3 offices, and the review will take a year or better. And Dorothy at the county office says these things do go through sometimes and does not promise anything. He did not speak, and nobody applauded him, and nobody put a hand on his shoulder, and when it was over he shook Colby's hand for about 2 seconds and said, "I'll come back when the board answers," and Colby said, "All right." That is where the two of them are. It is not friendship. It is 2 people who can now stand in the same courtyard. The others went home for lunch. Colby stayed, because the sun had come around the side of the gymnasium by then, and the courtyard had gotten warm in that thin way it does in late October, and because there was no reason to be anywhere. There is a strip of grass at the foot of the memorial about 2 feet wide that gets sun from 11 until 2. Argo found it before Colby did. He went at it the way he goes at everything now, slowly, with his back legs doing their own thing, and he circled once, and he lay down in it with his spine against the base of the plaque and his nose under the edge of his own tail. For almost 6 years that dog had slept on a porch step, in front of a door, with his ears up. He was asleep in under a minute. Colby sat down on the grass beside him with his back against the brick. His mother came out from the parking lot with 2 cups of coffee from the machine in the gym lobby, which is bad coffee, and she handed him one and sat down on the low wall. They did not talk much. She said the engraver had done a nice job with the S. He said the truck needed a belt. After a while she said, "Your daddy would have hated all that carrying on." "Yeah, he'd have gone out to the shed." "Yeah," Colby said, "he would have." The flag rope knocked against the pole. Somebody inside the gymnasium was dribbling a basketball, 1-2, 1-2, and missing. The dog slept in his 2 feet of sun. There are other names missing. There are other lists, read out every autumn in other towns, by men who turn the page a little too early, and somewhere in every one of those parking lots there is a family sitting in a folding chair, waiting for a door to open, doing arithmetic in the dark about what it would cost them to say something out loud. Some of them are still waiting. This one got his name back on a Tuesday morning, in raw yellow brass that anybody could pick out from the road, and by spring you will not be able to tell it from the rest.